Maryland students struggling through the pandemic.
I'm not surprised that the testing score went down.
As a major reinvention of education policy moves forward.
Investments into both career pathway opportunities can really help our public schools serve all students.
Tonight, a State Circle special, Classroom Crossroads.
Connecting Marylanders to their government. This is State Circle.
Good evening and welcome to a special edition of State Circle. The COVID-19 pandemic is being blamed for a sharp decline in the performance of Maryland students. We begin with this report from Nancy Yamada.
I'm not surprised that the testing score went down.
Parents we met in Germantown say the statewide decline in math and reading scores based on new national data confirmed their suspicions.
I think a lot of kids struggled during the pandemic.
With the lockdown situation, we were able to see what our kids were working on. We were actually able to see the process of the learning. And I think for myself, I found how it was lacking.
A sampling of 4th and 8th graders show between 2019 and 2022, declines were steep compared to the rest of the country. 4th graders on average scored 10 points lower in math and 7 points lower in reading. For 8th graders, average math scores fell by 11 points and reading scores went down by 5 points.
We had issues with teacher training, availability of laptops, the appropriate software to deliver remote learning, and in many cases we had internet connectivity issues.
Karen Couch is the superintendent of Kent County Public Schools. Through Kerwin funding and a state education grant, her school district is addressing the learning loss by thinking out of the box and training and hiring college students and retired teachers and professionals as tutors.
We have a huge retirement community in Kent County, so I think it's an opportunity for everybody to step up and be part of the solution. So we're beyond thrilled about this idea and this strategy.
The state is also divvying up more than $3 billion in federal funds, a one-time cash infusion that will be spread out among all school districts over 5 years.
Some school systems used it for adding summer school, adding specialists. Each county had to make a proposal as to how they're going to spend it. I think there's some money still available, actually, in some of the jurisdictions, and hopefully they use it.
Senator Paul Pinsky is the chair of the Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee, looking ahead to the next legislative session.
I've raised a point that maybe we have to add even additional money for tutoring. You know, we started with schools that have concentrated poverty. Originally, we said that tutoring would be for 5 years. We thought by then we would get all new young students, pre-K, K, first and grade, up to the reading levels we need. And that's where we thought the tutoring would take place. We might have to relook at that and add some more money or more time on that.
Despite the decline in scores,
I can see within my own children, I have 2 children, they're doing a lot better this year than they were last year.
And even in Kent County, after just 45 days of launching what's known as high-dosage tutoring,
it's made such a huge difference in how our students are responding and how they're catching up and filling those gaps.
I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
At the same time, Maryland is embarking on a massive overhaul of education policy and funding. It is known as the Blueprint for Maryland Education, or the Kerwin Plan. Sue Copen looks at how it will transform education over the next decade.
There's no lack of priorities when it comes to improving public education in Maryland.
You have to provide the funds so that the teachers can do the jobs they need to do. And if that's improving technology in the schools, all of that is necessary.
I definitely would support teachers' salary increase. I used to, when I first came out of college, I was a middle school teacher myself, and I had to supplement that with a part-time job.
Smaller class sizes are really important, as much as, increasing teacher salaries is important to their quality of life. I think for them, trying to manage huge classes is just really hard.
The Blueprint for Maryland's Future was created to tackle all of those concerns and much more. The goal, to make sure all children in public schools in the state reach their full potential. The legislature approved the Blueprint in 2020. The nearly $4 billion plan is being rolled out in 3 phases over the next 10 years. The blueprint is broken down into 5 policy areas called pillars: early childhood education, high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, college and career readiness, improving resources to ensure student success, and governance and accountability.
It is exciting when we have an investment in money, when we have a plan to expand pre-K, which we know is critically important, when we have a plan to offer more career technology education for our students, and we have a plan to raise teacher salaries in a time where we see a historic crisis.
Cheryl Boast is president of the Maryland State Education Association. She says there will be challenges.
We have to build trust. We have to show results, and they will be gradual. We've had setbacks with the pandemic. We've had a setback with the delay from the governor's veto. We can overcome those setbacks as long as we have investments and collaboration with everyone, both local, state, inside the classroom, and our families.
And there are challenges as well for the state's 24 jurisdictions who are charged with meeting the requirements and goals of the blueprint.
I have said many times, one size does not fit all, and that certainly applies to the blueprint.
John Woolhams, who represents the Maryland Association of Boards of Education at the State House, says some jurisdictions are asking for a little more time to submit their plans, but are not pushing back on implementation of the blueprint.
It has been a challenge by scale for some of our smallest systems to raise salaries for nationally board certified teachers. And to achieve that starting salary of $60,000, and to implement some of the reforms like the expansion of full-day pre-K for 4-year-olds and establishing partnerships with private providers.
For Marla Posey-Moss, president of the Free State PTA with chapters in 17 jurisdictions around the state, parents are looking to make sure their voices are also included as the blueprint moves forward.
We want children to be able to have their potential met. We want children to benefit from a safe environment with regards to education. We care about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Public education truly has the opportunity to be the great equalizer, to provide students from all backgrounds with high quality education.
Arvin Kim is a senior at Walt Whitman High School and the student member of the Montgomery County Board of Education. He's been an advocate for the blueprint for several years, joining with other students in Annapolis to make sure students' voices were heard.
Investments into both career pathway opportunities can really help our public schools serve all students, regardless of what their interests are or their plans after high school. So I think that's one great way that the blueprint is improving the experience and the opportunities that it creates for students.
And the vision for the state's public school system as the blueprint moves forward over the next decade?
The vision is that as students are entering pre-kindergarten, their parents and their educators are on the same page with respect to the expectation that by the end of 10th grade, all of those students are college and career ready.
I'm Sue Copen reporting for State Circle.
And joining us now for more on the blueprint is Shamoya Gardner, who's Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland. Ms. Gardner, thank you for joining us. From your standpoint, what would you say are the 2 or 3 most important aspects of this?
Thank you so much for having me, Jeff.
Certainly.
So we have to start with the fact that the blueprint must be implemented with fidelity in order for us to see any of the outcomes that are on the table. Now, the blueprint is focused in 5 key areas: early childhood education, increasing the quality and racial diversity of the teacher workforce, new college and career readiness pathways, additional resources to ensure the success of all students, and governance and accountability mechanisms to ensure that this multi-billion-dollar investment really does work as intended. And so for implementation to succeed, accountability has to be in place. But accountability isn't just state government entities. It is the folks who are impacted by the blueprint having a say in how their school communities will change in response to the law.
I wonder if you stop 10 people on the street and ask them about the blueprint, if the public really is deeply invested in this at this point. What message do you want to get out? And are there any misconceptions that you want to challenge?
Definitely. So the blueprint for Maryland's future at its core is a promise of a world-class education for every student in the state. And that is what's very, very important to keep in mind. Now, we've had detractors say a multitude of things that thankfully don't matter now because the blueprint is law. And what this means is the state is investing more, up to the point of $3.4 billion annually for public education and ensuring that we are directing resources to where they're needed most, to students who are dealing with concentrations of poverty at home and in school, to families that need access to early educational resources and family supports, as well as to students who are wondering, what is the point of school? What is next for me after graduation? And making sure that they have access to high quality career opportunities, certification, and all the post-secondary opportunities they can imagine.
Tell us about your organization and who you represent in this process.
Yes, so Strong Schools Maryland was actually founded in direct response to the formation of the Kerwin Commission, which is the body that made the recommendations that became the Blueprint Law. And our founder, Dr. David Hornbeck, understood one simple thing. All of this high-level policy conversation happening in Annapolis wasn't going to be worth very much if the students, the teachers, the community members that would be impacted by it didn't have a say. And so Strong Schools Maryland is really well known for our Teams of 10 model, where we ask anyone who values educational equity to engage with the people already in their community. It can be the folks you attend church with, it can be your family, it can be your colleagues. Just engage 9 other people and once a month come together to talk about the blueprint, learn about ways that you can take action and really get involved in implementation. So we are actually pretty unique because once we got the legislative win, once the blueprint veto was overridden in 2021, we didn't go away. And that's because we understand implementation is the long game. And the promise that was made does need directly impacted folks, keeping an eye on the state and local actors responsible for bringing us world-class schools.
So if people in far-flung parts of Maryland want to be involved, you're saying this isn't totally a top-down process coming out of Annapolis, but there's opportunities for local engagement.
Absolutely. Now, what we can expect with the blueprint is that the Accountability and Implementation Board is going to draft a state plan. We're actually in that process right now, and they're accepting written comment on that until the 23rd, which is next week, Wednesday. And after that state plan is approved on December 1st, our local school systems, our blueprint implementation coordinators will be responsible for developing local plans by March 15th. And that is the key opportunity to learn about what our school systems intend to do with these new investments, how they're going to be coordinating resources, and make our voices heard in the process so that we're all really invested in making sure we achieve those great outcomes for students.
Let me ask a skeptical question. I mean, this creates a large organization. You could call it a new bureaucracy, and there's been a lot of focus on that. I wonder if maybe it's preoccupied the education world, and because of the time and resources going into this, maybe we haven't done a great job helping the kids who have fallen behind during the pandemic in terms of getting an army of tutors out there to get these kids caught up before it's too late.
So to that, I would say the Accountability and Implementation Board is a brand new state agency. It's not super large. They've only got funding for about 15 staff, and they're working on getting fully staffed right now. And that's how we're going to ensure accountability. Critics of public education funding always throw around accountability and veiled insults that we know are often dog whistles to ensure that we cannot make the progress that we know students require in order to succeed. And so the Accountability and Implementation Board, I think, is less a bureaucracy and less a distraction than it is necessary to ensure that the blueprint is allowed to create the conditions required for students to succeed. The blueprint also does make specific targeted investments in tutoring supports. So there's transitional supplemental instruction dollars and a ratio of 1 educator or 1 tutor to 4 students. embedded in the blueprint to ensure that our earliest learners, if they get off track, if they are having difficulty acquiring literacy skills, receive interventions before they get further along in their careers and the consequences are more dire. So it does make that investment, and it's a very, very long process, but necessary.
You have a background as an educator. You hear from teachers all the time about just how rewarding the profession can be when they can make a difference, and at the same time, how frustrating it can be when there are barriers to that.
Yeah. And we're really proud of the relationships that we maintain with educators in a variety of formats. So we consistently hear that. As a former secondary science teacher, I am consistently hit with waves of empathy for what it is that educators are experiencing right now, and the way in which many of the systems that they themselves have been advocating to see addressed are now falling on them. One of the things that I'm excited about in the blueprint is its second pillar focus on the quality and diversity of the teacher workforce in the state. Listeners may not know this, or viewers may not know this, but the student enrollment in Maryland is 70% students of color and about 30% white. And our educator workforce is the exact inverse of that. When you look at teachers, when you look at librarians, school counselors, et cetera. And so there are a lot of things on the table when it comes to teachers. One is making sure that we are actually listening to them and understand the conditions that they require in order to succeed, and really taking them seriously when we listen to them, and then taking their recommendations into account. And the second is we have to ensure that we are being very critical about who it is we choose to place in front of our young people, because the students that Maryland is educating now and will be educating for the next several decades look and are very, very different from the students who have been educated in our public schools in the past. And it's imperative that everyone who is an adult in a school building understands that, is valued, and values their students as well.
Shamoya Gardner, Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, for a national view of what's happening in education, we spoke with former New York State Commissioner of Education, David Steiner, who is now Executive Director of the Johns Hopkins Institute for Education Policy.
We've had the record now of the NAEP results. This is the national report card, if you will, showing the worst results, for example, for 9-year-olds in mathematics in over 3 decades. And the attention to those results is merited. We really are facing an unprecedented decline in learning, but it's not like we were building on great success. We had 2 decades of essentially flat academic outcomes before COVID. So COVID has made an already difficult situation much worse. So that's the first thing. And the second, I think, are the culture wars now going on in our public school districts. As you know, on the one hand, a lot of noise, frankly, around critical race study, critical race theory, a lot of concern about the politicization of school boards, a question of whether we aren't taking our eyes off the core, which is what happens in classrooms, teachers teaching material to students, and instead focused on a lot of cultural baggage, which won't help, frankly, our students' learning. And that in a context where we've been, frankly, lying to ourselves about performance over a long period. Our high school graduation rates have been steadily rising. Our grade point averages have been steadily rising, and our academic outcomes have in fact been completely flat. So what that means is it's easier and easier to get A's and B's. We're telling parents that their kids are doing fine, and they aren't.
Let me pick up on the pandemic impact on learning loss. I saw a quote from you. This is a year old, but you said, remediation doesn't work.
Right.
What does that mean, and what can we do to help these kids? I think I imagine that a child in elementary school is going to be able to catch up. I worry about the kids in high school whose whole high school experience was disrupted, and there is no time to catch up.
Well, I think, first of all, why the remark about remediation? Because remediation means you go back to try to teach the student everything she or he missed in the past. Now, the first thing to know about that is, meanwhile, the students who are at grade level, they don't stop. They keep learning. So even if remediation worked, the child would end up well behind all over again. The second problem is it doesn't work, because when you tell a child they're being remediated, they know they're being taught down to, they know they're losing ground while their peers advance. And what the teacher finds is that there are all sorts of gaps, all sorts of holes. The more that teacher digs into what's missing, the more she finds is missing. And the gap is never closed. We know this from national data. What we should be doing instead is accelerating. We need to use targeted tutoring, longer school days, focusing on summer learning, so as to choose the materials that we know students absolutely must master to advance to grade level, not to go backwards and try to fill out all the holes in their learning, but to provide them, based on good diagnostic assessments, the understanding they must have to access grade level material. And we simply haven't done that as a nation.
You served on the Kirwan Commission that led to the blueprint for Maryland education that we've been talking about. What's your thoughts on that process, your level of optimism that it's going to make a difference as hoped over the next decade?
I wish I was more optimistic. I truly do. There were some important proposals made in that blueprint, including paying teachers better. We have a national problem with really teacher morale and good recruiting. There were important suggestions about creating a much stronger career and technical track, right, for children. Too many of our children go into college, never graduate, and come out with just debt and no career prospects. So there were good concrete things there, but bickering over the appointment of the oversight board, a lack of leadership, which I hope changes now at the state level, and a lot of recent discussion about districts saying, oh, we're not really on board, we need more money. It doesn't have to be this way.
Is Maryland's education reform effort an outlier, or is it, when you look at education nationally, is it aligned with what other states and districts are trying to do?
In theory, what we recommended from the Kirwan Commission is consistent with good research, but it's all about implementation. We can write as many blueprints and manuals as we wish. In the end, what happens in the classroom is the only thing that matters, right? Are teachers using stronger curriculum, something we urged? In some districts like Baltimore City, yes, they are. And that's really to the credit of the superintendent and her team. In other districts, not so much. Is the training being done of tutors, right? So just tutoring anything doesn't help. If you say one thing about how to solve math problems and the regular classroom teacher says another, the kid's just confused. Are we aligning our tutoring with classroom? I doubt it, right? I don't see that evidence. Are we really focused on a strong building of statewide career and technical pathways with industry, right? Articulated with industry and our community colleges? I don't see that coming as quickly as it should. So yes, in theory, to answer your question, we are in sync, but in practice, there's a lot to be solved.
You mentioned teacher shortages and teacher pay. What else can we do to help teachers? I mean, it's a great profession. It does not pay great. It has some perks. I mean, you get summers off. You get a pension, which is hard to come by in the world these days. What should we be doing there?
Well, the first thing is we have to stop attacking them as, as if they're responsible for all our social, cultural, and economic problems, right? We just drop every one of those problems at the schoolhouse door and say to teachers, you solve it, please. That is just unrealistic. Second, we have to stop asking teachers to be curriculum designers as well as teachers. They spend 6 to 9 hours a week pulling stuff off the internet, right? Pinterest, teachers pay teachers, and then acting like DJs of curriculum playlists, right? That means that the quality of your kid's education is totally dependent on the luck of your kid's teacher. Look, teachers should be focused on teaching. We should give them the best curriculum we can. Then they can make some modifications as they wish, but they shouldn't be doing 2 jobs. They should just be doing the teaching job. And thirdly, we need leadership from principals, right? We know that the biggest reason we lose teachers is they don't feel supported by their principal. And so we have to invest in principal leadership preparation so that we get the school leadership we need.
When we look at education nationally, globally, the United States does not perform as well as we would like. Is it a social thing in the United States, a political thing? What could we be doing differently to be more globally competitive?
We are engaged in creating so many proxies for what we should be focused on. What do I mean by that? Look, we talk about critical thinking. I'm sure you've heard of that phrase, right? We should all be teaching children critical thinking. Well, you can't think critically about nothing in particular. You have to learn something to think critically about it. We can't bypass academic content.
Our thanks to Dr. Steiner, and we thank you for watching State Circle. Have a good night.